Hello, everybody. I am Portia Sabin, the president of the Music Business Association. Welcome back to It's Your Money, day 2. This is the final day of our final multi-day event until August. So I think we've done almost 60 events since the beginning of the pandemic. So it's exciting in many ways to be doing it and also to be done to some extent. We have a great day lined up for you guys. We are going to get to it in just a second. I wanted to just make sure if you weren't here yesterday that you go and watch the welcome video. It's very helpful about learning about how to use this platform, Socio. We're also going to have some breaks today where you'll have a chance to network with each other in the Jackson Lounge. And then when you want to come back to the next session, go back to the agenda and click on the next link for the next session. I'd also like to thank Empire so much for sponsoring this event. It's been super so far, really great information. If you were not here yesterday, definitely go back and watch the recording, which will be available to everyone who registered. It was, truly dropping gems that will be useful to everybody in the long run. So not to belabor a point, let's get right to our keynote. I'd like to welcome Clayton Blaha, the head of partnerships at Audius, who is going to moderate our keynote. Hi, Clayton.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to have a chance to interview Daouda, who's been a mentor and a friend for many years now.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to let you guys get right to it.
Awesome. I think this will probably be very casual. As I mentioned, we are close friends and talk just about every day.
What's up, Clayton?
How's it going?
It's good. It's Wednesday, which is a good day.
We're having a lot of personal stress right now, but I'm excited to take a little break and chop it up with you. We had some preliminary ideas that we had tossed around, but I think it probably makes the most sense to just start a little bit about your background and maybe even some of the history leading up to how we first met.
Yeah, well, I've been working in the music industry for 18 years now. I started in 2003. And previous to that, I had worked in the finance industry, working for a hedge fund called Tudor Investment. I was very fortunate at an early age. From 16, I got exposed to the finance industry through a guy by the name of Paul Tudor Jones, who created Tudor Investment, and he started an inner city program called the I Have a Dream program, which was all about helping inner city kids go to college. And it was a scholarship program, and then they exposed us to internships at different banks, investment firms, a lot of different companies throughout the New York City area. And I was one of the kids that was fortunate enough to take advantage of that. And it, really just shaped my professional career very early on, and my interests. I had a lot of interest in computers. My parents, bought me a computer when I was 10 years old. They, when my parents talk about it, it was they just, in 1990, they were like, we need to figure out a way to give our kids access to what's going to shape, humanity. And I was, big into computers. So by the time I got to college, I was majoring in computer science and management information systems. And I parlayed that relationship, that I had with Paul Tudor Jones into a job, because I went to Northeastern, so they had a co-op program, and I was able to position Tudor Investment as a part of the co-op program, and was able to, I got to work there, where I was able to build computers for traders and work with the venture group around building their first website and working with them on sort of some analyst work. So it just really, primed me for understanding the world of investment, the world of, how technology plays into the world of finance. And in 2003, because of my relationship with a producer and a songwriter and DJ by the name of Clinton Sparks, who was, from Boston, I had built his first website, and most of his, websites, throughout our career working together it was kind of like I had this opportunity to be an entrepreneur. I was like, what was I going to do? And, you know, at the time I was going to try to run my own like design and development agency. And Clinton was like, why don't you work with me while I try to build my career as an artist? And I was like, you know what, that's a cool idea. Like using this sort of like totally different skill set and experience to work with creators. And that's how I got my start in the music business.
Yeah. And for any of those that weren't around back then, Clinton Sparks was an icon of the mixtape era. Absolutely one of the most formidable and popular mixtape DJs back then.
That radio became a,
yeah.
you know, that, yeah. He
so
actually
in
has
that
a show
go ahead.
that people should check out. He does this like Twitch show about how to make it in the music industry.
Nice.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. So yeah, I mean, like, so you as you mentioned, you had a really fortunate early entree into like the world of finance and technology. How did that inform like the strategies that you employed while optimizing the business for Clinton? And then like, how did that extend into the current streaming era?
Yeah, I think, you know, at the time I was like super obsessed with how the internet was changing the world. And, you know, it had already, this is 2003, it had already sort of like decimated how the music industry was operating. And I, you know, while that was happening, what I thought was, well, there's other technology that exists that could be additive. And one of the first things that I did when I started working with Clinton was I built a newsletter. That was like very, you know, like that was pretty much non-existent in the music industry at the time. But I just signed us up for Constant Contact, and I put like this like newsletter feature on his website, and I made like the prominent thing, like if you want to like communicate with this artist, like let's do it through email. And we built a substantial newsletter over the years. It was either through people coming to the website and signing up, you know, people who had been buying the mixtapes. And you know, that was also new. What I did was I was featuring his website. You know, I made his website at the time about a place where you could go to get his mixtapes. You could download them. When most of the time people were just buying them from us hand to hand and or selling in stores. And so it was through that newsletter that I began like taking industry contacts. Anybody I would meet at that time, I would be like, let's just add them to the newsletter, even if they didn't actually sign up. I know that's like, it's not a thing you should do now. Shouldn't be adding to your newsletter that don't sign up.
Whatever it takes.
But back then, that's what we were doing, and it allowed us to like build a business because that's how we would get bookings. I would send out these email blasts that would be like, you know, updates about a new mixtape or a party that we were, you know, throwing, or the fact that you know, we were building a syndicated radio show online. So our whole business at the time for those from like 2003 to 2007 at least was like, how do we build a web presence, even right. Social media? And I used like podcasting software at that time. There was this platform called Audio that enabled you to put up a podcast. And then at the time I was like, Clinton, you need to like switch from using like just vinyl, you know, with turntables and a DAT machine or ASR 10 and like use things like Pro Tools or Serato. And it was just really like, what emerging technology could we use to like create a competitive advantage, right? You know, at the time, you know, Clinton would get booked for like shows overseas, and it would cost you hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars to ship 5 crates of vinyl.
Yeah.
And so it was like, Serato can save us a lot of money. We'll be able to do more and spend less.
Yeah.
That's kind of it. If I look back at like what I was doing at Tudor, it was how do we use these different information systems and technology to give the traders a leg up? Like, how can we build a faster computer? What processor could we use? What computer should we buy? You know, what email software do we need to be using?
Even like where the office location is, because if you're doing if you're trying to do like front run trades and stuff, there's a great book about this, but like even like the proximity of the office to like whatever trading desk, like that kind of made a difference. So
totally. So
it's also, the newsletter is interesting to me because I know eventually you also grew this into a larger distribution network for other people's mixtapes and mixtapes of Clinton's.
We partnered with a company called Mix Unit actually to build. This guy Mike Rios. He saw what we were doing in terms of building like this online mixtape business where we weren't selling them just yet. We were, because it wasn't really like e-commerce wasn't that like powerful at that time, and he built the first mixtape website, and we partnered with him. Clinton became a partner. And we ended up bringing a lot of DJs that we knew onto that platform. And it was through that newsletter, because we were reaching out to so many DJs to get Clinton's music on their mixtapes and different things like that. We were able to bring those artists onto the Mix Unit platform, which enabled them to sell their music.
Right, and that's so in line with like the idea of throwing these emails onto an email list, because then. I mean, and we're seeing it happen now. Like that was ownership of the audience, right? You were able to kind of own your own means of distribution and own that audience in a way that was opt-outable by certain parties, but like also it was something that you controlled and that couldn't be wrested from you. And I feel like that is such that consolidation of distribution towards a smaller number of people is kind of what we're seeing now, right? Like the idea of third-party playlisting going away on Spotify is like a very scary thing, because like then how do we own that? One of the things that I like to explore and that we are very fascinated with the audience is like, how do we give more of the ownership of these relationships back to the artists? And that's kind of been a through line of the work that I've seen you do.
Yeah, I think as a manager, your job is to manage your client's audience, right? And so that was what we were doing with the email newsletter. And what we built at CreateSafe, the first product that we built that, we haven't gone to market with it. It's more of like we look at it as like an enterprise software for like established managers, where it's like we built a CRM where it's like you're capturing information about your deals, and you're able to manage that process of being able to like properly generate sales leads for your clients. And that with like a newsletter is just the early version of what a CRM, has become now. And so if you think about Salesforce or HubSpot, all of those things are integrated now, because that's what allows you to track your customer from the moment of like meeting them to, continuing to monetize that relationship. Yeah,
it's such a powerful thing to be able to own and interpret that data. And it's crazy thinking about how much, the mega corporations that we interact with on a daily basis know about us that we don't know, and the same for the artists that we manage, right? Like the data that's available to me on the back end of any streaming platform right now currently is, I couldn't plan a tour around, like not safely, you know what I'm saying? Or like, I wouldn't be able to like, I think this is one issue that everybody has, that's like, it's so seemingly should be able to be solved by like just looking at the data that we should own, is like, how many small t-shirts am I going to sell like on this next tour? Like what percentage of my audience is like female between these ages, and where do they reside, or things like that. And like the thing is that like that data exists, it just isn't made readily available to us. And I just see what CreateSafe is doing is a way
aren't pushed to go after that information. I know like maybe on the streaming platforms, because they control a lot of that information. But one thing that I noticed like moving into the MySpace era was people were ready to give up their access to their audience for an easy way to put up a website. And I always thought about that. Like I was always mad at the concept of MySpace, because I was just like, why aren't people just building their own websites where they can capture all of this information for themselves?
Yeah.
In this day and age, it still matters, but like I think we've gone through a decade of looking at like, how do we build audience on Instagrams, Twitter, Facebook, Spotify, but no one has really like a lot of people haven't really preached, well, they'll build this information yourself. And I think things like I'm forgetting the platform, but like you're an advisor to it. They just sold. Tonin, did a great job at that. And there was another company early on that I used to use that sold to Beats, and they did a great job with that.
Yeah, and we really I mean, that's a big part of our roadmap, is providing this data that users will opt into, and if they do opt into, they experience a richer fan relationship, and same with the artists. It's a lot to build out, but also it doesn't satisfy a lot of my ethical concerns if we're leveraging that for advertising, and that's something that we will never do because we don't store any of the data. And it truly does belong to the artists, and vice versa. So it's something. I think it's a natural progression. I think it's an inevitability, and I think that you guys are really positioned to really just handle that, especially in the wake of everything that we've seen happen with big data in like the last 6 years.
Yeah, I think we just need to be taught, at least on the management side. I know artists, like, sometimes it can be challenging to have to like fix your mind and think about this path. But the reality is, like, when you're talking about like how do you make money and how do you manage your money in today's era, it's how do you take the data that's available to you to be able to leverage that data to create revenue out of your music, and then also how do you manage that?
Right. Yeah.
It starts with data, and I think that's where Web3 is empowering a new, ability to do exactly what I just said, like going from data to your money.
I mean, I think if you zoom out and you, as I believe we all should, the music and the data around it are their assets, and I think this kind of ties back into the Wall Street thing. Is like, at the end of the day, like, you've been brokering assets for the last 20 years. And creating means of protecting, valuing, and leveraging those. And that's what I see. That's what's so exciting about what's happening in the Web3, with whatever you want to call it, decentralized networks generally, is this ability to like harness the value of those things and then apply it elsewhere in a way that's like frictionless and not. It doesn't necessarily require us to, be manipulated by advertisers in the midst of doing so. Like, this next web is going to be owned by the people that make it valuable, and that's the underlying philosophy of Audius, is that music is valuable, and the people that you create value around platforms, and you should own them.
I think you and I both arrived at similar conclusions together and separately when working at Alsla, where, like, when you think about like. Our time, Clayton and I were like running Alsla Publishing, which is Skrillex's publishing company. And our time there was meant to like invest in the future, like superstar writers that would create assets for this company and obviously for themselves. And when you think about it, that is a financial job.
Yeah.
There's inherently a creative aspect of that, like spotting talent, developing and nurturing that talent. But the reality is, our role was to like manage the finances of that company and invest in the right, songwriters, which we did successfully. Like people like Blood Pop, Neonza, Georgia Koo. These are people who've gone on to write like great, assets that are now probably being bought and sold in these big catalog sales. And I think, what dawned on us at that time, thinking about some of the conversations we had before, was like, okay, how are these assets actually being managed long-term? And how are these platforms compensating these artists after someone puts in all this work to like develop and nurture this type of talent? Right. And what new platforms are going to exist to be able to give, songwriters, producers, artists, the ability to monetize their music in new ways.
Yeah, and that's what's so funny. I know that you've dabbled and participated in the NFT space, and it's so exciting to me because there's a huge amount of obviously attention around it. I don't even want to talk about it a lot of the time because I became everybody's go-to, like, tell me about this. But at the same time, it's like I think what it looks like now is not what it looks like in the future, and what it does look like in the future is lightning fast rails for the monetization of these assets that you're mentioning, and basically unmitigated value transfer between parties that are accessing these copyrights and that are accessing these assets. So like, does an NFT look like a JPEG in 2021? Yes. But I think it looks like a catalog of music in 2026.
But it's even a JPEG, like I think I think like right now, people have gotten, very excited about this new market, but they're sometimes not looking at like what's being bought and sold. And what's being bought and sold are contracts.
Yeah.
And like that is also what is happening in the music. The music industry is based on contracts that are being bought and sold, whether it's contracts for music, whether it's contracts for touring, whether it's contracts for merchandise. That's essentially what's the transactions that are being made. Hence why you have to have a lawyer involved in all of those transactions.
Yeah.
And I think that like the current state of what you're seeing around NFTs has been very focused around, like you said, JPEGs and probably like QuickTime files. And what I see and what we're working on is, well, how do we use NFTs more so to manage music rights, which is really how you monetize your music. How do you, it's how you manage your business. And that's all, a smart contract is just, a good way to not have nefarious business deals happening, opaque accounting processes.
Trustless. You don't need to trust anybody. It's all right there.
And so it's a very exciting time. I think, what we were able to do with Grimes was more so like, that was a project that was 2 years in the making. When I started working with Grimes, she came to me and she was like, hey, I've always been a producer. My business, like I've always focused on the idea of producing the concept of Grimes and creating the concept of Grimes. And I would like to focus more on that than focusing on the idea of having to tour to sell the concept of Grimes, or having to sell physical merchandise to sell the concept of Grimes. Why can't I monetize Grimes through just the art? And because she had this deep affinity in terms of like how digital and virtual works, one of the first things we discussed was like, well, how do we sell digital goods? How do we sell virtual goods? And this was after, her and her brother had created an avatar of herself. And so we were like, well, now that we have this actual virtual character, how do we sell things in this virtual world? And that's how NFTs came into play. And it was something that we were working on since last year. And I think market conditions, as we already went out and started to sell her art, which was based on digital art. Like she had made paintings using a Wacom tablet. So these were made in a digital setting. Then they had made other paintings that were made, using like Unreal as a video game engine. And so it was a natural step to sell this as NFTs. And it was a part of that strategy was like, how do we use these smart contracts to now raise money to continue the development of the Grimes enterprise? And I think that's how people need to be seeing what the powers of what Web3 have to offer. If right now you can go to MetaMask, this is going to cost you no money. You can go to MetaMask, and now you can instantly be operating in Web3 because you have this digital vault that you own. Now, if you want to fully own it, because technically there's this concept called not your keys, not your coin. And the reality is, if you set up something on MetaMask still owns that web address, that wallet address. So for $69, you can go to Ledger or other companies where you can buy a cold storage wallet. Bingo. And for $69 now, you own the keys to your financial sovereignty. And at that point in time, you can continue to go down the rabbit hole and recognize where you can use things like DeFi to get investment for your art. You can use NFTs. You can go to a platform like OpenSea or how do you pronounce that platform?
I don't know.
Tezos. But you can now mint your art as an NFT and then seek out investment from your fans in a decentralized financial transaction.
That's exactly how we think about the creation of creative assets on Audius. like eventually upon monetization, there will be so many different ways that you'll be able to hyper-serve certain audience members that will pay actual money that then goes into creating value around a piece of art. And then so many different ways to monetize that. Ideas that we toy with are like the idea of like, so, you know, like say an NFT, say you do an open edition NFT and now you have this asset that is in your wallet that you own forever, along with financial assets like USDT, which is pegged directly to the US dollar. Like all of these things can exist digitally in these wallets. But then where does the inherent value of that NFT come? Audience could fairly easily build out product that allows you to access exclusive music if that wallet, if you're holding that NFT in that wallet. This could be the CreateSafe wallet at some point too, right? And then, you know, then you're tying an actual financial transaction to a feeling that you get when you hear an amazing piece of music. And that to me is like why we all do this, right? And that is a hugely like, that feeling is what we're always going for, but it's so intermediated in the current streaming paradigm, in the current world of being a musician, that it's so exciting to see what I believe to be an alternate music industry, just like the metaverse is an alternate reality. I don't think the music industry actually stands to benefit necessarily from doing what we're doing, and that's totally okay. But I think that there's a large segment of people that are going to be super, super excited to kind of play in the space, and we're seeing it a lot with like artists like everybody from like Diplo and Disclosure to like Mike Shinoda, like some of our biggest users.
Yeah, I mean, well, you know, I'll give a little bit of insight because you mentioned the CreateSafe wallet. That's what we are building that today. You know, some of the first products that we released were around giving people financial autonomy. We put out these financial simulators, the record deal and the publishing simulator, because and we built those because we felt there was not enough education that really showed you how to manage your finances around deals that you do. And then as we were developing them, we thought, like, well, what if these actually existed in a more unified product that was connected to your assets, and connected to your money? Mm-hmm. That was where the concept of a wallet came into play, because wallets are essentially the new ways in which we're managing our money. Like if you have an iPhone, and I don't know about Android phones, but there's a wallet already native to that holds your digital cards or your tickets, and essentially your debit cards. And so we were like, well, how could we bring to like what is going to be the future? And it's probably going to be a mixture of like what you're doing already with regular banking and what you're potentially going to be doing with Web3. And if you had these financial simulators baked in, you could easily, make transactions where you could say, oh, okay, cool. If I spend this much money, then this is what it's going to do to my business. If I invest in myself here, this is how it's going to affect me over here. And so today, we're working on this product, this concept of a wallet that enables you to like manage your assets in one place, manage your different, money that's associated with your music business, essentially pay your collaborators, receive different payments from people you're transacting with business on, and also manage your music assets in the form of smart contracts. And so we're very excited about that. We're looking at launching the product this summer, more so like July. And we really think that that's going to be a game changer for artists and their teams to be able to manage their music businesses. When we think about what a music business is, it's a company that has a bank account, that has an accounting system, and a group of people rallied around that who are running that together for the benefit of making great art. Yeah.
I think that one of the biggest challenges of kind of pivoting into the world that I'm in now was unlearning a lot of what I had learned in the traditional music business. And I think that you had a lot to do with that, honestly, because we've had this conversation before. But essentially, yeah, like I don't think of CreateSafe as a music tech company. I think of it as a fintech company for people who have hugely fucked up financial lives. So like, and that's the unfortunate the kind of trajectory, or the unfortunate kind of status quo of being a musician for the last 20 years. And I think that approach is such an immediately necessary application of everything you're doing. I think it's going to be used and it's needed now. And then also, I see that it has. I know that you have your eye on this future where even some of the things that CreateSafe is doing now will be obsolesced by solving those problems and then helping to build these other things, which is kind of where my attention is at this point.
Yeah, I think that when I got into the music industry, most of the things that I was attempting to do for the first 10 years of my career, people would say that's not how the music business works. That's not how things are done. You can't do that. And I honestly adhered to a lot of that because I was like, well, I'm not an expert here. I need to learn and follow. And then after a decade plus, you start realizing after working with enough artists, seeing a lot of successes and seeing a lot of failures, you start realizing that this is one industry where it is the wild, wild west and anything goes. And that is only because some people just don't want to have any structure or standardization. And because the technology now exists, like streaming, you can't have that. There's too much volume in terms of how the music business right now for you to have that wild, wild west mentality. And that was what really inspired me to start building, CreateSafe. I think that's what inspired you to go down the path of working with, companies like Audius and pursuing the decentralized path, because it just shows there is a new way, and it's being dictated by the people who create technology, period.
Yeah. I mean, there's entire cottage industries within music that exist due to inefficiencies. And again, many of those people have ownership of these distribution channels and are very much incentivized to continue in the current paradigm. What's exciting is that because of the limitless access that we all have to information, this is kind of one of the last things I think we were going to kind of touch on, is that there's no limit to what we can learn and apply to create these alternatives while continuing to support artists in the current ecosystem. And I know that's something that is education is a huge aspect of what you do. And I don't know, I think that you and I both are kind of circling ways to explain these concepts to people in an actionable way.
Yeah, I mean, where we're currently at is a huge digital divide. And I know a lot of people who have been working on that even before everything that has now happened over the last couple of years in terms of the massive, wealth gap that we have, been seeing grow. And a lot of it is due to technology. And we have to figure out ways, not only in the music industry, but, in general, in terms of America, the world, how to bring people along with us. And Web3 is very challenging. It's a very daunting thing because it requires a lot of mental investment, and it requires a lot of changing of your belief systems. And I think that there are some people that would also want it to be the case where people are unenlightened and unempowered. And so I feel it's my duty to be at the forefront of providing that type of knowledge and information and understanding. And that will always continue to be a big part of CreateSafe. It's
also a big part of just managing artists, which is something that I have probably tried to not do for the last 5 years. And I just can't quit. When you feel that ability to help somebody so acutely.
And there's something that's very awesome about working with creators and being a part of the process of making sure amazing art comes to fruition. And because it's like a healing thing, specifically music. if you do any research, you'll learn that like thousands and thousands of years ago, in places like Egypt, like music essentially was used as a healing tool. Like the invention of music comes from the place of like, how do we use these harmonies and frequencies to provide healing solutions, enlightenment for people. It was very, very spiritual. And that's why if you think about the course of the music, there's always going to be like this spiritual element to it. And I think that when you can recognize that and you can see how powerful that can be, it is important, to be at the forefront of providing the tools for people to be able to do that in the way in which provides sovereignty, provides empowerment, provides autonomy, equity, and access to something that is like a natural part of the human spirit.
Yeah, and I think that is what's so exciting about where we're at in terms of the Web3 thing specifically, is that like these ideas, these inefficiencies, these inequitabilities, these problems exist in just about every facet of society. And for whatever reason, music being the most, the universal language and being so accessible, tends to be the canary in the coal mine for all of this. Like, I think that, YouTube as an educational resource for people all over the world is such an incredible thing. And it's like, it's going to accelerate accelerate the human condition in such a real way. But you don't really get there without like Kazaa, or something like that. It's like, it's so impossible to see those things kind of transpire, but that's how technology works. And it's so exciting to know that you and I are both working on things that like could lead to like huge advances in medicine at some point. It's just music's always first. Anyway, I think we got to wrap it up. Thank you for letting me pick your brain.
Yeah, great. It was great to have you part of this, man. Take care.
I miss you. I will come back to LA very soon.
Indeed, or Mexico.
Yeah, please come to Mexico. Portia's going to take it over from here. Thank you, guys.
Thank you guys so much. That was awesome. People in the chat really loved it. So, you did well if the people in the chat are onto it.
Hey, love that.
So,
I didn't even look at these.
That's terrific. Yeah, it looks like they're checking out Deal and Pub Simulators, CreateSafe.io.
Can I comment in here?
No, we didn't have commentability for whatever reason.
Oh, we always have good folks come into these.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Portia.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Daouda. Thanks, Clayton.